Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. My last session, if you guys were there, I kind of ran out of time to answer questions, so I'm going to try to leave some more time this session to answer questions. Yeah, so please put them in the chat, and I'll try to spend as much time as possible, make sure I get to all the questions at the end this time. So I'll present for hopefully slightly shorter amount of time. If you were in the other session, there's one slide that I just copied over from the last slideshow to this slideshow about my background. Just I don't know, bear with me, and yeah, I don't know, deal with it. All right, cool. So yeah, here we go. So my name is Ryan. I am a senior data engineer at Lion Studios, which is a game publisher that makes a lot of mobile games, many of which you've probably seen before, hopefully seen before. Yeah, my talk today is going to be about creating mobile games with Unity. Now, at our company, pretty much every game that we publish or that we work with is built in Unity, and so I'm going to explain a little bit about what Unity is, how Unity works, and then I'll also talk a little bit about just like the overall just like game market in general, and kind of the lay of the land, how that works, and where Unity sort of fits into the whole thing, and why this talk is on Unity rather than any other technology. There's several that you can use to make games, but obviously this talk I'm focusing on Unity specifically. So before we get into that, just as for my background, I went to Hamlin Southeastern High School here in Indiana, graduated 2012, went to Indiana University, and I studied business and real estate. I was doing like finance stuff, so I ended up working at Goldman Sachs, which is an investment bank. And then when I graduated from IU, I decided I wanted to switch from like the finance business world into the tech world. And so I took off a year and I learned how to code. If you're in my other talk, I mostly did that through just like looking up how to code on YouTube and kind of learning from that perspective. And after I learned how to code, moved to San Francisco, got my first job as a software engineer at a company called Sensor Tower, which you actually will see later in this presentation. They kind of they collect data to see how many people have downloaded a game, how much money a game has made, that kind of stuff. And so that was my first job. Then after I quit that job, I worked just like remotely, kind of traveling around Europe and just, I don't know, hanging out and learning stuff while I was working. And then I got my most recent job as a data engineer at Lion Studios, which is what I'm doing now. And I'll talk a little bit more about exactly what I do at my current company. But yeah, so that's my background. And so, yeah, so now back to Unity. So what is a game engine? Well, first of all, so Unity is a game engine. And then, so, you know, when I say that, what does that mean? So what a game engine is it's basically a software environment that is designed for people to build video games. And so, you know, if you think about what is included in a video game, you know, there's a lot of like really complicated stuff that if you had to write it yourself, it would make it almost like impossible to make games. So some examples of that is like, say you're playing, you know, Fortnite and you shoot a gun, right? There's a concept of a bullet traveling out of that gun and, you know, whatever, hitting whatever, you know, character is in Fortnite. And so if that happens, if you made the game without a game engine, you would have to do some like crazy like PhD physics to be able to say, you know, if a bullet is moving at this speed and in this direction and the person is over, you know, you'd have to do all that kind of stuff. Same thing with, you know, gravity, right? That's something that a game engine handles, that, you know, when you're moving around in Fortnite, you're on the ground or you move towards the ground or whatever. And, you know, doing that, you know, it's just those kinds of things that the game engine handles. Also, the logic of the game. So what happens when you press the up arrow, what happens when you click, what happens when you tap the screen, all of that kind of stuff. You write it in code, and then the game engine will then turn the code that you write into something that happens on the physical screen in the game. Same thing with animation, which obviously is pretty self-explanatory. Everything that you see when characters are moving or trees are swaying in the wind or whatever has some kind of animation associated with it. And so that is also handled by that. And so basically that's what a game engine does. There's two really popular ones, which are Unity and Unreal Engine. I'm not saying these are the only two, but like I would say 99.9% of games are probably made with these two game engines, especially mobile games. And so that's not to say that they don't make other games. So for example, I've mentioned Fortnite a couple times. That was made on Unreal Engine. Whereas like most, like Candy Crush and like those kinds of mobile games are typically made with Unity. And the other benefit, probably the biggest benefit of these, is that when you make something on a game engine, you can then sort of export that game to both iOS and Android so that you can, publish it on those stores. Whereas, in the past, if you wanted to do that, you would have had to make an iOS game, and then you would have to make an Android game. And then anytime you wanted to change something, you would have to go, you'd have to do everything twice. Plus, iOS is very different than Android, and the coding language is different and all that kind of stuff. And so the game engine just makes all that, very easy for you. And then you can just export it to iOS or Android or PC, or, even for Unreal Engine, you can even create games there and export it to like Nintendo Switch or, PS4 or whatever. A lot of games are made with these two engines. So this is what like Unity, the actual like engine looks like. So there's two parts of the engine. There's the game editor, which is what we're looking at right now, and then there's the code editor. So in the game editor, like this is where you sort of like arrange everything. You can kind of see you're in like a 3D world, and there's some little things. These are like little bombs. This was for just like a random like prototype that someone from my company made that is a game. It's like a little puzzle game where you try to get these bombs to explode. And actually, I'll show you the actual game in like the live environment actually in a second. So yeah, this is what the actual like game editor looks like. And you can see like over here, there's a lot of information about, what position this item is in the world, and what's its rotation and how big is it. And then there's a lot of other information about it that I won't get into because it's a little too in the weeds, but you kind of start with this, right? And then when you want to do something with these things that are in the scene, so with these bombs or this platform, you then go to the code editor. And then, so the code editor is where you then put in, the different logic of what happens in the game. And so let me see. Where is it? All right, here we go. So here's an example. So this is a game where, like I said, it's a puzzle game where you click on one of these bombs, and when one explodes, it makes the one next to it explode. So, like if, you can see over in the left side is like where you set up the stuff. So, if I wanted to, this bomb is made up of it's made up of like a sphere, of a cylinder that like is the top of the bomb, and then the little like wick you can see up here too. And then it's sitting on a platform, right? And so, if you wanted to play the game, you can, test all this stuff out, and then you see how the bombs like change colors over time, and when one bomb hits another bomb, then the other bombs explode. The idea is to use as few clicks as possible to like make them all, so it's like this is the kind of thing that we would make. And notice how they changed colors each round that we did, and see that's the type of thing that you would put in the code editor. So here we have just like a list of different colors so that there's some variation between levels and the bombs aren't all like boring looking, for example. So yeah, so that's just an example of like, what the editor does, what the actual like code side of thing does. And then, like I said, if we wanted to, you can kind of see this like looks already like, an iPhone or Android phone, whatever. And so if we wanted to export it, we could then export this to both iOS and Android so that you could then play it on the App Store. Okay, cool. And then now, so yeah, so those are, just an example of two of those things. So now back to this. Another thing that is really useful for Unity in particular, and they actually do have this for Unreal Engine as well, but I would say it's stronger for Unity, is an asset store. And I'll actually just like go visit it so I can show you what it actually looks like. So it's like, so say you want to make a game and you want to make a 3D game. What you can do is you can actually go to the asset store and you can just like find things that people have already created. So, say you wanted to make a game with like, I don't know, let's see, what is this? So this is like little, yeah. So, okay, so this looks like a Pokemon type thing where in this asset pack, someone has already like designed all these little characters. And so, if you wanted to, and you had an idea for some kind of game that you wanted to make that required, I don't know, what is this? Like a little chicken, a bat, whatever that is, a leaf, whatever. And so you could then go into here, you could just buy this asset pack, and then you'd be able to like make a game that uses those characters. And so that's like one of the other valuable things. And so there's, 3D assets, there's 2D assets. I'll show another example. Let's see. So if you wanted to do here, so yeah, here's some other stuff. Maybe you need trees, or maybe you need some like little cities. Maybe you need characters that shoot bows and arrows and guns. Maybe you need someone who dances. Like here's another thing. So like there's a ton, pretty much anything you can think of. Here's like a bunch of animated people that are just, walking. So if you wanted to make like a game like The Sims or something, and you wanted a bunch of people, or for example, like Fortnite would maybe even like go here and just like snag these characters and then just like plug them into the game so that you could choose that character or whatever. And so yeah, so there's the asset store, and I'll talk a little bit more. Actually, yeah, I'll just go into that now. So yeah, so as far as like what the different like job types are related to like Unity or creating games, you have your game designers, the software developers, the computer programmers, the animators, and I'll talk a little bit about what each one of these do. And here's like just like a rough kind of estimation-ish of the salaries of these different things. And so an animator, yeah, let me go back out to here. So an animator, it's basically the same as like in art class. You kind of start with a like block of, clay, in this sense, you start with a digital block of something. And over time, you then, you stretch stuff out, you use what are called vertices. And so you like, stretch them out and, shape them and move them. And then slowly over time, you keep sculpting it until it starts to look more and more like actual thing. And then you add what's called like bones to it so that you can start moving it around. So, now it has arms and legs, and you can, shape it to move and run. And then once you've done all of this, you can then like export it to Unity so that if you wanted to use this character in your Unity game, now you can use the character in the game. So that's what an animator does. Let's see. So, and then a game developer, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but, a game developer basically, makes the game. So there's a lot of games that have been made by like one person that have done really well. And some examples of those, like I think Candy Crush started off as like not a ton of people made it. Same thing with Roblox, if you've ever heard of that. But yeah, a game developer basically develops the game. A game designer, what they do is they come up with like the story for a game. So, some games are obviously more, fit for having like an actual story than other games. So here's an example of a game called Episode. I am not a huge fan of games like this, but a ton of people are. This game actually ended up making, I think, here, wait, let me click on this. $45 million in what time range? From Yeah, November to December, it made, yeah, like $45 million in revenue. And so obviously that's a ton of money. And, a lot of that is due to, someone had to design, what is it's kind of like creating a TV show in a way. You got to design like, what is the conflict? What is the plot of the story? What happens if you, choose why not? What happens if you choose I dare you? And so, someone has to go in and design all of those, things. And there's like a lot of psychology involved of, what to do when and that kind of stuff, what people are interested in. There's a lot of thinking about who your target demographic is and what types of issues they deal with in their daily life. A lot of the same types of things you would deal with if you're, creating a movie or something like that. And so, yeah, that's what a game designer does. And obviously this is a example of a game that's like very story driven. And like I said, not all games are that story driven, but yeah, that's what they do. Okay. Cool. So now I'll talk a little bit about just like games in general, the overall game market. So here are some like popular genres. You may recognize some of these games, you may not. So there's casual, which is a game like this. There's, I think it's called like Johnny Trigger or something. Puzzle, game like Candy Crush. Word games are very popular. And then there's shooter games like Fortnite, Call of Duty, PUBG. Sports games like this one, I think it's called like Golf Clash or something like that. Racing games like Mario. So those are all those are some of these. There's definitely way more genres than this, but these are some of the popular genres. And I would say, with the exception of like shooter games, pretty much all of these are typically made in Unity, because, like I said, of all the reasons, it's like a lot easier to build stuff in Unity. Some stats on downloads, basically these numbers are just like so big, it's kind of hard to even grasp, but like, billions and billions and billions of downloads for these games. Typically, games on Google Play get a lot more downloads, but people often buy things a lot more often in games in the App Store, just kind of the way it is. And then, worldwide, 28.7 billion downloads across both of these. And that's just in the fourth quarter of last year. Same thing, again, you can recognize a lot of these are some of the like most popular games. You recognize a lot of them. Like I said, all of them except for probably like Call of Duty and maybe PUBG are created with Unity. And then if you look at top games by download, also I mentioned that I worked at Sensor Tower. And so Sensor Tower is the company that like collects all these statistics. And so that was actually the first company I worked at before I worked at the gaming company. And so, I worked on, styling this chart and that kind of stuff. But anyways, and so, here for 2020, at least January through September, I'm sure a lot of you have played Among Us. That was the most popular game by downloads. Then you have like Roblox, Call of Duty. This is Discord. Obviously, it's not a game, but it falls under the game category. Subway Surfers. This you like Untangled Knots. And then, yeah, here's Fortnite, a casino game, a stacking game. Save the Girl. That's one of the games that that my company created. But yeah, you can see lots of downloads. And then even more revenue. The games that are doing really well are generating almost like $500 million in revenue. I would say most of these games are being created by like teams and teams of people. But, even if you get like a little tiny fraction of this, it's still, revenue is revenue. So, yeah. As far as the steps for developing a mobile game, I kind of talked a little bit about some of this, but and this also depends on the genre that you're doing. Obviously like a racing game doesn't need that much of a story, but you're going to start with like building up the story. And then from there, you're going to, choose your game engine. Like I said, this is about Unity. I would suggest if you're trying to learn one, to learn Unity first. And then if you want to, you can kind of go into Unreal Engine. But, whatever, it's up to you. Then you design the game structure and the wireframe. And what that means is like figuring out, what happens when you open the game, what happens when they click play, what happens when they go to like the store or whatever, all of that. You design all of that and, figure out what you want it to look like. Then finally you develop the game and test it. And then these last sections are what I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about, which is your monetization strategy, launching the game, which are obviously, if you want to make money, very important. Okay, so there's two ways that games like this, or that games, specifically mobile games, monetize, or sorry, advertise. So how they get users to come into the game. And that is via, ad networks, basically. And so there's two kinds. There's social networks, and then there's pure ad networks. And obviously, it's what it sounds like. Social networks are Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Pinterest, YouTube, things where they're social, TikTok. And then there's also more, more traditional, just like pure ad networks, which are like AppLovin, Bungle, these other ones that you probably haven't heard of, most of those. But those are honestly the probably the more annoying ones in a lot of ways, in the sense that they're the ones that, when you finish a level of a game, they're the ones where they're showing that ad that kind of like comes up at the end, or when you want an extra life, like they're often the ones that are showing that ad. And then, so as far as like people coming in, there's inorganic traffic, which is traffic that you do pay for, which is what I was just talking about. And then there's organic traffic, which is traffic that you do not pay for. And so a lot of games, like the ones that you hear about a lot more, like Among Us, for example, or Fortnite or something like that, they typically don't have to have a ton of inorganic marketing. I'm sure they do to some extent, but because a lot of those games spread by word of mouth and sort of by you telling your friends about it, they're actually able to be really profitable because they don't have to spend money getting users, and then they get users who then spend money in their game. Whereas inorganic marketing, which is marketing that you pay for users, is what most people or companies typically rely on, and what my company mostly relies on. And the thing about inorganic marketing is that if you're paying for users, you have to make sure that you're generating more money from those users than it costs to acquire them, right? And so, looking at how games make money, there's two ways that they make money, which is through ads, and there's three types, which I'll show on the next slide. And then there's in-app purchases, which are basically, in-app purchases, which is what they sound, purchasing things either in the app, or some apps you have to even just pay for the apps to get them to begin with. And I would say that's a lot less popular now because most people don't like to pay for apps. But people buy a ton of in-app purchases. And then games that don't have in-app purchases are almost definitely going to get their money back in some way. And that's typically through these three types of ads, which are rewarded, banner, and interstitials. Rewarded videos generate the most amount of revenue, which is why, when you play games, there's often like, oh, do you want an extra life? Click this ad to get an extra life. And because you kind of like choose to watch those, they generate a lot more money, generate a lot more revenue, as opposed to the kind that show up just like unwanted after you finish a level, where a lot of people, when they get that ad, is when they, turn off the game or whatever. And so yeah, those are like the two main ways. And then you've probably seen also just like at the bottom of apps where there's just like a little banner in the bottom part, and that's a banner ad. Those don't generate that much revenue, but a lot of games just have them just for a little extra money. All right. So now I'm talking about specifically my company and what I think are the most like easiest games to start with if you're learning Unity are hyper casual games. And so these are all apps that my company has built or built or published. And so here's just an example. You may have played some of these, maybe not. But yeah, what is a hyper casual game? Basically, it's a mobile video game that's easy to play and usually free to play, and feature very minimalistic user interfaces, meaning that it's like really simple. It's not like super elaborate like characters or anything like that. Everything's kept really simple. And so a lot of the ideas for these games, the reason I think these games are really good to start with if you're just, trying to build something small, or if you want to, kind of get your feet wet with building games in Unity, is, like I said, because they're easy to play, they're usually pretty easy to build. And typically, a lot of them come from other things that have already like existed in the world, either other games that were popular like 20 years ago, or things that are popular now that aren't necessarily games but can be turned into games. So I'm going to show you some examples of what I'm talking about there. So it's crazy. You guys are so young at this point that you guys, I guess most of you probably weren't even alive at this point. But here's a game. You've probably heard of Mario Party before. But this is a game that came out in like 2000. And the goal of this game is to like bump people off of this little platform, right? And so basically, what Hyper Casual does is they say like, okay, this was like a fun mini game on Mario Party. Maybe we should make this into a real game. And so in 2018, a game studio created this game, and you can download this on the App Store. It's called Bumper.io. And as you can see, it's very, very similar, the same mechanic. And by mechanic, I mean the goal is just to bump people off of this platform and see who wins. And I'm sure they show you some kind of ad at the end of this in order to make money off of you playing this game. Let's see, another example. Here's another one from like the early 2000s. This was from a game called Pokemon Stadium that came out in like 2000, where this was like Pokeball, and you're trying to keep it from like going into your little like section, right? So yeah, that's this game. And then, all they did was take that same concept and build, it's nothing original, just build the exact same game, release it on mobile, and, probably make, millions of dollars from, releasing the exact same concept, exact same game. You don't really have to like come up with anything original. You could probably find this like environment in that like Unity asset store I was telling you about. So like, someone could probably make this game in just like maybe a couple days or something, and then make thousands or millions even of dollars off of it. And so that's, two examples. Another example that's kind of similar to that, but, a little bit different, is that, there's a lot of games right now, like people like, like ASMR, they like, kind of like satisfying videos, I guess. And so here's an example of a game that got 60 million downloads. That has 60 million downloads. I see there's a lot of questions, so I'll just show this one and then I'll wrap it up. Okay, so there's 60 million downloads for this one, and you can see literally they just took TikTok videos of people cutting things, and then they turned it into a game of people cutting things and got a ton of downloads. All right, I'll jump over to the questions because apparently there's a good chunk of them. Okay, where is my question sheet? Is this the right sheet? Oh, here we go. Yep. Okay, why did I decide to participate in this program? I'm assuming, I don't know if you meant Nextech, but I guess, I don't know. I like sharing, this is a lot of stuff I didn't know about before I started learning how to code, and before I started, I don't know, just thinking about that as a career path. And I think it's really useful to kind of just know what's out there. There's not a ton of like game development stuff in Indiana, especially. And so, this was something I had to find out about over time, especially after I moved to San Francisco. Let's see, Unity and Unreal. I kind of talked about that a little bit. Basically, they're the same, just Unity is a little bit simpler. Unreal is for more complex games, I would say. Also, the coding language you use is a little bit different, so it's a little bit harder for Unreal. Let's see, how difficult is it to create a custom game engine? Very difficult. Yeah, I mean, like I said, you have to be on your stuff. You got to know physics, you got to know math, you got to know a lot of really complicated stuff to create your own game engine. Really doable. Unity, the people who created Unity just made like a couple, like billions of dollars off of, they had an IPO recently. So, you know, if you make a game engine and it works, you're going to make a lot of money. So I say go for it. My favorite game engine, definitely Unity, because of ease of use. Yeah. Does Unity use WebGL? You can export to WebGL in Unity. Let me see. So if I wanted to, let's see, build settings. So you can build it as iOS, tvOS, PS4, Xbox One, Android, or WebGL, and then export it as any of those. Let's see. What is a Unity game that makes particular use of the engine? I don't know. I mean, honestly, all the ones that I kind of showed do. You know, basically, I mean, I like puzzle games, so I think, you know, games like Candy Crush and those kinds of games make really good use of it because they, yeah, because they're simple. But really, any game like the ones I showed you that are really simple and make a lot of money and get a lot of downloads are, oh, about to run out of battery. Make a lot of money, get a lot of downloads are ones that I think are really interesting. Let's see, do I prefer Unity or Unreal? I kind of answered that, Unity. Have I ever tried to make my own, I don't know if you mean game or game engine. I have made my own, let's see, TV video puzzles. Let's see. Yeah, here's an example of a game that I built myself. Again, I kind of stole this video from the video that's actually used inside of it from TikTok of a cool video that I saw. And it's basically like a puzzle game where you have to like sort the, yeah, you gotta like sort it and create, you know, make the picture match. So yeah, I don't know. That's a game that I built. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of buggy. It doesn't work that well. I have terrible reviews on my app on the App Store. But yeah, I don't know. It was fun to build, and I learned a lot. Let's see. How did you decide you want to make mobile games on Unity? Really, like I said, I was working at this company where you can kind of see, like, you know, I was working for Sensor Tower, so I was like, you know, building these dashboards every day, and I was seeing that like when I went to games, that, you know, so many of these games are making so much money that I was like, it would be really cool to just like know how to build a game and then just like build one and make a bunch of money. And so that's why I decided to make mobile games with Unity. It was kind of my personal choice, but my company also sort of mandates that the companies we work with use Unity because it does make a lot of stuff easier and makes it easier for us to just like, you know, make a game kind of go viral or whatever. Godot, I didn't mention Godot. Godot is also a really popular game engine. I would say it is less popular now, but it is definitely a popular one. And like totally, all of them use the same general structure. So all of them kind of do the same things. It's just you're going to find a lot more like resources for Unity on like how to do things, on you know, finding the assets that are like on the asset store and that kind of stuff. You're going to find a lot more of that with Unity than you will with Godot, I think. But, you know, it comes up to you. Specific needs sometimes need specific game engines. Programming language used in Unity is C#. Pretty straightforward. Why do game developers use polygons and shapes as the nature? Mostly because game engines understand polygons and shapes really well. Because a polygon is just like a collection of, you know, of points on an object, and so it's able to, you know, essentially know the X, Y, and Z coordinate of all of the points that are a part of this object. And if you connect all those together, then you can kind of, you know, you can make objects. And so that's why they use polygons.